What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Daily Bible Reading Snapshot. Today we're looking at Ezekiel 27 and 28. Then we're looking at James 4 in the New Testament. Now, in Ezekiel, we just talked about the city of Tyre yesterday. The city of Tyre actually gets 3 whole chapters here in the book of Ezekiel. We got the last chapter of yesterday's reading and then both chapters today. Now, I said that there's some interesting prophecies that take place in the book of Ezekiel, specifically in chapter 26 about the city of Tyre, where Nebuchadnezzar is going to come in and destroy it, and also the king Alexander the Great is going to come in later on, and he's going to do some damage, and I think we see some fulfillment to these passages later on in the Bible. But chapter 27 is an interesting chapter. It's a song of lament, like the book of Lamentations we studied earlier. The idea that it's a sad song about all the sad things that are happening to this city. And what God basically says is, you should write this song of lamentation, and you should say, raise this song, Ezekiel, that it is such a sad thing that Tyre had to be so sinful. You said, I'm perfect in beauty, Tyre said at one point. Your borders are the heart of the sea. Like, you had this great area. It was a perfect location. And you had all these people coming in and out, and you exchanged all these goods. And basically, the middle of the chapter, verse 10 to verse 25 is just all these different nations that traded there. It's an amazing long list. You probably don't even know most of them. I don't know most of them off the top of my head. You're reading these and be like, I don't know where that is. I don't know where that is. I just know those are impressive places that there's all this trading taking place. But the problem is, in verse 36, the merchants at some point will look at this city that God judges and say, you have come to a dreadful end and shall be no more forever. How terrible is it that such a beautiful, amazing city comes to a terrible end? Why does it come to this terrible end? Because of their sin. Because of their choices to do what was wrong and evil, God brings judgment. The judgment is right and true, but there is some sadness about it. Like, oh, it's such a shame that this city, so beautiful, so amazing, had to choose to do all these sinful things and be judged for it. Now, chapter 28 is more specific prophecy about the leadership in Tyre. It's called the guy named the Prince of Tyre, which you think is the king, the person who reigns. Even the word prince in this book shows up over and over again to describe the people who were in leadership in these different nations. And this one guy, the Prince of Tyre, becomes proud in his heart. It says, because of your heart being proud, you have said, I'm a god, and I sit in the seat of gods, in the heart of the seas. But you are a man. You're not a god, though you make your heart like the heart of a god. Indeed, you are indeed wiser than Daniel, which is an interesting thing that the Israelites really looked up to Daniel at this point in the exile, because Daniel was their guy in the center of Babylonian power. They're saying Daniel's our hero. It's funny. Ezekiel writes about how Daniel's the hero. It's just interesting. Probably don't think about it like that. But he says, and no secret is hidden from you. But he says, because you made your heart like a god, and you said, I'm a god, I'm so amazing. He says, you are going to be judged. Then it says later on in verse 11, it's a little bit of a transition. It says, moreover, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, raise a lamentation over the king of Tyre and say, thus says the Lord. Okay, now, here's a prophecy, a lamentation that God speaks over these people. What does he say? You were the signet of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God, and every precious stone was your covering. He lists all those. He says, you were the anointed guardian cherub, and I placed you, and you were on the holy mountain of God. In the midst of the stones of fire you walked. You were blameless in all of your ways from the day you were created till unrighteousness was found in you. In the abundance of your trade you were filled with violence, and in your midst you have sinned. So I cast you as a profane thing from the mountain of God. I destroyed you, O guardian cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire, because your heart was proud in your beauty. All right, so there's a lot here, and you might be thinking, that's kind of weird. The king of Tyre was like that important and beautiful. Well, I think that there's some layers to this. First of all, I think God is clearly calling out the king of Tyre, who must have been an important, proud person who was, full of beauty and riches and honor and wisdom and all that stuff. But yet this person thought he was more than what he was. But you also see some allusions to Satan, don't you? The guardian cherub who's in Eden and just an amazing spot. But he falls because of his pride, because he says, I want to be worshipped like God. But you even see another allusion to Adam as well. Adam was in the garden. Adam was set as the ruler of this garden. Yet he even said in his heart, I want to do what I want to do. And I want to transgress against God until unrighteousness was found in him. Then he was cast out. We see that picture in the book of Genesis. So it's just an interesting, there's some allusions, I think, to Satan. I think there's also allusions to Adam in all of this. So interesting section about how evil this sin is. And really, it gets to the heart of what our sin is. We say, I think I know better than God. I want to be in God's place. God, I don't have to listen to you. I'm going to be in your place. That is the evil of sin. And we do that too. You might not say that explicitly and say, I don't want God to be my ruler and king. Maybe you do say that explicitly, but you might live it out by the way that you choose to act. When we choose not to obey God, we're replacing the leadership and the lordship of God with our own desires and putting those things on top, which again, it's interesting as we turn to the New Testament today. That is what the problem was in this church. In the book of James, chapter 4, he says, what causes quarrels and fights among you? Okay? It's the same thing that the king of Tyre had. It's the same thing Satan had. It's the same thing Adam had. What is it? That you have desires and that your passions are at war within you. You desire and you don't have, so you murder, right? That's an expressive way of showing your desire, right? You want something, you can't get it, so you kill people to get it. He says that's the extreme version, but on a lesser extreme version, you covet and you can't obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you don't ask. You don't even pray about these things. That's the problem in this Christian community. And maybe that's a problem in your Christian community. Why are there fights? Why is there relationship drama? Well, it's probably because you have desires that go unmet. And also the desires oftentimes are not prayed for. And when they are prayed for, you pray wrongly because you want to just get God to answer your prayer so you can spend it on your passions. That's what verse 3 says. It says, you adulterous people, right? These Christians who are acting this way. That is not how we should act as Christians. Verse 4 says, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? If you want to be a friend of the world, you want to get close with the world like the king of Tyre did in the Old Testament reading today, you want to do that, well, you're going to make yourself an enemy of God. It says, but God gives grace. He's willing to draw near to you if you draw near to him. If you humble yourself before God, God is willing to embrace you and forgive you, not based on what you've done because you're a sinner, but really based on what Jesus Christ has done for us. Then he says, if that's true, verse 11, don't speak evil against your brothers. Remember at the beginning of the chapter, he said, there's quarrels, there's relationship drama. What do you think was happening? They were speaking evil against one another. So he says, don't speak evil against one another. The person who speaks evil against his brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and the lawgiver. And there is one lawgiver and judge, and that's God. Don't destroy your brother. Don't judge your brother because God is the judge, not you, which again, that's the whole point in the book of Ezekiel too. God is the judge. Then we see if God is the judge and you shouldn't be judging your brother and speaking evil against your brother, what he also says is don't boast about tomorrow. Don't think that you're in control of all this. God is the one lawgiver and judge. He's the sovereign king. You and I, we're not. So he says, don't boast. Don't say today or tomorrow we're going to do this, this, and this. He says, say, if the Lord wills, we will do this, that, or the other. And I think as you look at all this, specifically our Old Testament reading paired with the New Testament reading, I think what it should cause you to say is, I don't want to fall into the sin of worldliness. I don't want to fall into the sin of hating my brother. I certainly don't want to boast about tomorrow. I don't want to be a person who's fallen under the judgment of God for my sin. But thanks be to God, if you trust in Jesus Christ, that God judged Jesus in your place as the sacrificial substitute for our sin, that he is the atonement for our sin, that he paid for our sin. Trust God and thank him for that. But then in response, don't cheat on God. Don't live like an adulterous person. Make sure that your trust is in God. Make sure that as you choose to live your life today, which you're going to have choices today that you're going to make, right? Am I going to friend up with the world, or am I going to do what God says? Am I going to humble myself before God and put away the relationship drama and pray to God, or am I going to hold on to these passions and fight with other people? I hope that today, as you think about this passage, that this will come to mind as you're tempted to do those things, and that you will live in a way that's pleasing to God. So, thanks for reading. We'll see you back tomorrow for another daily Bible reading snapshot.